Hello and welcome to Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, and talkSPORT's chief football correspondent, Alex Crook, in another massive weekend in the Premier League, and we're here to look back on it all. This is what's coming up on the show.
I think from a Liverpool perspective, they will be disappointed with the forward players. Salah wasn't at his best. I'm not sure he's been at his best for many games this season. The key point now from a United perspective is this can't be another false dawn. It didn't look like a dressing room who aren't playing for their manager.
I don't think it's as good as you're making out. I think Liverpool were under par and you were just not as under par as you have been. Those moments just before the second goal were quite nervy, and it was getting to the point where there was a bit of tension creeping into the Emirates, but they dealt with it. And I suppose that in itself is a sign of a team that, have got good character and resilience.
Yeah, you still worry about them in terms of killing games off, because there've been a few matches like that this season where they've sort of been hanging on at the end when they shouldn't.
How they let a 2-goal lead slip against a team, let's be completely clear, don't really have much goal scoring power.
No, it was incredible. The Palace have gone there yet again and given Manchester City a real headache. I don't think City are going to win the league this season.
Hello and welcome. And before we go any further, the first thing we must do is give our best wishes to Tom Lockyer at Luton Town and everybody affected by the events that happened on Saturday. You may or may not know that in the 65th minute of that game down at the Vitality Stadium, Bournemouth drawing 1-1 with Luton, Tom collapsed. He had a cardiac arrest. He's now stable, in hospital and undergoing further tests. And look, it was a traumatic experience for everybody who was involved in that particular event. And we do wish him the very best, and his family as well, who are with him at this moment in time by his side. And they've asked for privacy. So I think it's only fair that we respect that. They don't want to run in commentary on it, the next stage of his rehabilitation, etc., etc. So we're just going to step back from it and leave it there and just wish him all the very best. Welcome to Manchester. You okay?
Yeah.
You delighted to be here?
I am. Always delighted to be with you on your sofa, which is a lot smaller than last time I was here, because you broke the old one, didn't you?
You said it was too big, the old one. And you didn't like it, so you wanted to be a little bit cuddlier.
This is quite cosy, isn't it? Yeah.
Don't snuggle up for everyone.
Don't touch me.
That's not what you were saying the other day. Right, okay. Also, not what you were saying today when we went to Anfield. We went off to Anfield to watch that huge match between Liverpool and Manchester United. And Crookie was so scared to be in Liverpool because he was worried that Liverpool fans were going to hate him because he's a self-confessed Manchester United fan. And he's all over the talkSPORT social media. He wouldn't go to the toilet. Is that a true story or a true story?
No, I didn't need the toilet.
It was a true story. You said you were too scared.
Listen, it was a hostile atmosphere, although not as hostile as I expected, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about it in detail. But a terrific point for Manchester United. Listen, Liverpool had more than enough of the game to win it, but they couldn't get the ball in the back of the net.
No, they couldn't. And there was a couple of missed opportunities at the other end as well, which I'm sure we'll get into over the next few minutes. Listen, it wasn't the best game. There's no doubt about that. But it was the biggest one. Let's get stuck into it. We will talk about Arsenal being top of the table very shortly. We're going to start with Liverpool, though, because they missed the opportunity to go top of the table. 0-0 with Manchester United. 69% possession, 34 shots, 8 on target, 12 corners. Manchester United with 6 shots, just the 1 on target from Rasmus Højlund, which he probably should have scored, and 0 corners in the game. Many people believe that this was a game that could put a glass eye to sleep. I think it was just it had a bit more of a pulse in the second half than that, but it wasn't what we were expecting in any way, shape, or form.
No, because I think most of us were expecting a big Liverpool victory, and the way they started the game, that first 5 or 6 minutes where they forced 3 corners in the first 4 minutes of the game, they really tapped into the atmosphere of the crowd after they sung "You'll Never Walk Alone." But after that, yes, they had a lot of corners. Yes, they had a lot of possession. But actually, how many saves did Onana really have to make? There was the one from Van Dijk that he tipped over the bar in the first half. Trent Alexander-Arnold maybe a bit unlucky with a chance that he couldn't convert. But I think it was a day where Manchester United dug in, and we haven't seen too many of those this season. Yes,
are you happy with that and that style of play? Was it so necessary at this stage just to go there and ensure they didn't get one hell of a beating, that they had to perform in that manner with very little ambition?
I think it wasn't. And listen, I've been getting a bit of a stick from non-Manchester United fans saying, well, is this really what United have fallen to? Well, yes, it is over the course of this season, but not actually just the course of this season. They've only won 3 now of their last 18 trips to Anfield. They got hit for 7 last season. Liverpool, 1 defeat in 50 home Premier League games. So I think actually anybody who comes away from Anfield with a point this season, however you get there, is going to be pretty happy. Obviously, I had the absentees, no Bruno Fernandes, no Harry Maguire. Who'd have thought that would be an issue at the start of the season? But I thought Varane and Evans did very well at the heart of defence. I was raving about young Kobbie Mainoo. You thought I was getting a bit over the top with my praise for him.
You said he was sensational. And I thought, okay, he's had a very good game. He's played well and he's adapted, actually, to a hostile environment. It wasn't usual Anfield hostile environment, but it was definitely, a difficult situation for him to step up into. But I thought the word of sensational was a bit overblown, because it's not as if he created 12 opportunities and he walked away with a match ball. He did okay. He did really well, and he deserves a lot of praise for that. But sensational is someone who scores a hat trick.
Well, there's different ways to be sensational, and it was a big occasion.
Your standards have slipped.
They have slipped. Of course, they have. Absolutely, Manchester United standards have slipped. But the key point now, from a United perspective, is this can't be another false dawn. They've given themselves a platform now. They've got a difficult game live on talkSPORT against West Ham next weekend. They can't go to Anfield and play with that commitment and determination and get a point, and then go to West Ham and revert to type. They need to start putting together consistently good performances. It wasn't a great performance, but I thought they defended well. From Liverpool's perspective, Jurgen Klopp wasn't too unhappy when I spoke to him afterwards. He felt they created enough chances to win the game. They probably did. I did see an interesting confrontation in the tunnel between Virgil van Dijk and Andre Onana, and obviously Van Dijk has been hammered by Roy Keane for his comments on television, but he was not happy. He said to Onana, "Thanks to you, we only played half an hour's football." Well, listen, there's different ways to skin a cat, and Onana just smiled at him. I think he's a bit surprised that Van Dijk was so affronted by Manchester United's tactics, but I sort of agree with Roy Keane on that one. Stop moaning.
Well, basically, Roy Keane's premise of his argument was, sometimes teams have to go in and behave in a different way. There was a lot of times when he would go to Old Trafford and Liverpool would dig in and stop them from trying to play. And it would be Manchester United's responsibility to go there and try and break them down, or vice versa at Old Trafford. So, be careful, because sometime one day soon that might happen to you. He was a bit angry about it because he felt that he was being a little bit disrespectful. I thought he was just exasperated, because I think not only was disappointed Van Dijk with the overall performance from Liverpool, because it was a bit there, wasn't it? It was lethargic. There was no real crispness to it, and I was expecting a little bit more, especially after the first 15 minutes when I thought they blitzed United. And if they'd scored in that first 15 minutes, I believe they would have gone on one well. But I think he was disappointed with his forwards performances. I think that's what frustrated him. And he said, it's easy for me to sit there at the back and watch these things happen. So he was sort of making a commentary on his own team as well. So it wasn't just Manchester United.
I think he probably had more shots on target than any other Liverpool player.
Best chance.
Yeah, he did, with that header. And it was another one that he put into the keeper's arms in the second half. I think from a Liverpool perspective, they will be disappointed with the forward players. Salah wasn't at his best. I'm not sure he's been at his best for many games this season. Nunez, Scott Minto, obviously chief cheerleader for him. I thought the game passed him by. I thought his touch was poor. Diaz, probably the pick of the three, but he got taken off as well. And then there's Trent Alexander-Arnold, who we're talking about as potentially being a key part of England's midfield come the European Championships. I thought his final ball, his distribution was wanting.
Well, I've said this to you, didn't I, as we were walking out of the stadium. We constantly talk about Trent Alexander-Arnold, about his progression as a footballer from a right back into a midfielder. And he clearly is so good on the ball when he's given the time and space to be able to execute the pass on the majority of the occasions. But today, it didn't really work for him. And there was times the Palace game that I saw recently, it didn't quite work for him. The quality of the ball into the box wasn't there. And if you're talking about someone who's got to play in a quarterfinal or a semi-final of a World Cup, you can't get shut out the game like that, or get put under enough pressure the way your delivery isn't spot on. So maybe he's just a little spell that he's going through, and he's just adjusting to a new position. Because still, you've got to remember, this has been less than a year that he's been doing this, where he's been walking into midfield. So there's still a little bit of work to do on that. You said that Manchester United surely can't have another forced dawn. Manchester United can't put in another good performance like this, or average performance like this and then decide to go to West Ham and throw it all away. History tells us that they can, and they probably will.
Yeah. I mean, there's been so many occasions this season when, the Chelsea game, to be fair, they played Chelsea off the park, and then they turn up and just produce an absolutely stinking performance at home to Bournemouth off the back of it. So I think Ten Hag will be searching for that consistency they've not shown so far this season. But Perry Groves made a good point, didn't he, before the game? He said, we'll know today if these players are really playing for their manager, because, listen, they could have gone there and chucked it in and had another heavy defeat, and then I think Ten Hag would have been in a really difficult position once Sir Jim Ratcliffe finally completes this 25% acquisition. But they didn't do that. Even Raphael Varane, who we know hasn't necessarily seen eye to eye with Ten Hag over the course of the season, the way that he was whipping up the crowd and his own teammates, he showed real leadership qualities. McTominay with the armband as well, trying to lead the press at times. Johnny Evans, who came in at 35, and United fans were saying, why are they doing that? I thought, again, he dug in for his manager. Amrabat, having picked up an early yellow card, wasn't great in the first half. Thought he did well in the second. So it didn't look like a dressing room who aren't playing for their manager. Obviously, the big disappointment, Rasmus Højlund, another game where he doesn't score a Premier League goal.
I just got a text message. I got a text message here. So, Scott Minto. It says, how many goals has Nicholas Jackson scored in the Premier League, and how many goals has Rasmus Højlund scored?
It's becoming a problem, and Ten Hag said it will come. That was a massive opportunity, and it would have been a perfect away performance had he have scored, but he didn't hit the ball with any conviction. He didn't look like he backed himself to score the goal. It should have been laces through it, try and take the back of the net off. He hit it straight at the goalkeeper, and you won't get many better chances to open your account than that.
It is strange because you have given quite a lot of stick to Nicholas Jackson and Darwin Núñez, and they have scored more goals than Rasmus Højlund. He's got 5 and 6 in the Champions League, by the way, so he hasn't been barren. But in the Premier League, for whatever reason, it hasn't worked for him, which is a little bit of a concern, really, because if you actually look at the Manchester United attack and the Antony, Højlund, Rashford, Garnacho, if you look at them over the course of the season, add all their goals together in the Premier League, they've got 3, and Kai Havertz has got 4. And you've been having a go at him as well.
You love that stat.
So everyone that you've been having a go at has got more goals than the people that you've been defending with your life.
It's a problem because defensively they did their job today. For them. But it's a problem because defensively they did their job. They tried to hit on the counter, much like they did at Arsenal actually early in the season.
That's what they
are.
But
again, they missed chances there.
That's what they are.
So is that the difference this season to last? Last season, Marcus Rashford was scoring goals for fun on the counter.
Yeah. Maybe. But listen, I think this is something that we sort of argue about. I think you give too much stick to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, but he recognised really early they're not that good. So the best way of them to play, actually, and they're most suited to, is to play on the counter-attack. And they were really effective in really big games against Manchester City, in games against Liverpool, and against PSG, for example. That was their modus operandi. They were good against Chelsea doing that as well. They like to play on the counter-attack. That is their natural style now, for whatever reason. I know Manchester United fans want them to go back to that traditional wingers, front foot attack. But actually, inherent in the group is a counter-attacking style, which actually suits them better. And actually, you saw today that again was the best, probably the recipe to get the best out of them.
I thought they used the ball better today when they had possession. Obviously, that wasn't very often because Liverpool dominated that stat, but they did play their way out from the back, and Nana did that very well. You were saying he's going to get caught. He only has to get caught once and they'll score.
Yeah, well, I was worried about it because he was getting shut down quickly, wasn't he? Núñez seemed to have the bit between his teeth in the first 5 minutes.
But he did well today, Nana, much to Van Dijk's frustration. He saved the shots that came his way, and his distribution was excellent. They got it out wide. I thought Antony used the ball quite well at times. So did Garnacho. So maybe it's coming together.
I don't think it's as good as you're making out. I think Liverpool were under par and you were just not as under par as you have been.
Standards are low.
We should probably move on because there wasn't the only game on Sunday. In fact, actually, Arsenal weren't at their very best, but they beat Brighton by 2-0. They end the weekend as a result top of the Premier League after beating Brighton. They made hard work of it, really. 26 shots. And there was 5 minutes between a big Pascal Gross chance and Havertz wrapping up the game. It could have been very different, actually. And if it had finished 1-1, I think Perry was saying, and he was down at the Emirates Stadium, he was saying, look, those moments just before the second goal were quite nervy. And it was getting to the point where there was a bit of tension creeping into the Emirates. But they dealt with it. And I suppose that in itself is a sign of a team that have got good character and resilience.
Yeah, you still worry about them in terms of killing games off, because there've been a few matches like that this season where they've sort of been hanging on at the end when they shouldn't really be hanging on. It would have been totally against a run of play. Had Brighton taken that one big chance, it came their way. Roberto De Zerbi admitted afterwards that they were far from at their best. But Arsenal have got themselves into a position now. They're top of the table. They've taken advantage of the fact that Manchester City are slipping up now on a quite frequent basis. And you still feel there's more to come. You still don't necessarily have confidence in their strikers that they're going to take the chance to come their way. Maybe they'll look to address that in January, but it's not a bad conundrum, is it, for Mikel Arteta? We've not been brilliant, and here we are at the top of the table. We're almost halfway through the season.
And great that Havertz actually has started to put some goals in on a regular basis, actually. I think that's his 4th goal in his last 6 or 7 games, and that's a good return for someone who everyone was criticising at the beginning of the season. They didn't really know where he fitted in to the team, but he seems to have sort of found his value for them now, and he's scored a couple of really key goals for them in recent weeks. It sets up this brilliant game next weekend at 5:30, doesn't it? Because this is like, I don't know if you. When I was a kid, I used to really care about Christmas #1. Who was top of the charts on Christmas Day? I'd sit there with the radio on the Sunday because I knew that everybody else found out at top of the pops on the Christmas Day.
You're showing your age now.
Whereas I like to listen to the radio 3 days before they gave it away. It was brilliant. I used to tape it and all that kind of stuff. And this is a chance to be Christmas #1. Liverpool against Arsenal. Who gets it?
Not sure that Arsenal will win the game, but I think they're capable of going there and getting a point. So therefore, the answer would be Aston Villa.
Imagine if that was the case. Right, let's get to Saturday's games and start at the Etihad Stadium, because there was late drama in this one. And talking about not seeing out games and looking a little bit wobbly towards the end, Manchester City have won 1 of their last 6 Premier League matches. Manchester City 2, Crystal Palace 2, Saturday afternoon. Late penalty given against Phil Foden. We've got no complaints with this penalty, right? I mean, because Pep Guardiola did have a complaint about it initially. And then I think he sort of must have seen the replay. And then by the time he got to the interviews, he was like, look, there's nothing wrong with this penalty. This is a penalty. But it's another disappointment for him and his men. How they let a 2-goal lead slip against a team, let's be completely clear, don't really have much goal-scoring power.
No, it was incredible. The Palace have gone there yet again and given Manchester City a real headache. I think one of the endearing images of the season so far was a veteran, Roy Hodgson, who obviously has come under a lot of scrutiny in recent weeks, laughing at Pep Guardiola and his antics on the touchline. That's the sign of someone who definitely isn't ready to call it a day just yet. And his team didn't call it a day, did they? They could have wilted. City should have been out of sight. They weren't. And actually, Palace capitalised on a couple of pieces of really poor defending. Both goals, I think City will be disappointed with. But they've just lost that bit of ruthlessness, City, this season. And I do wonder, and we mentioned it last week, is it because they're treble winners and maybe they've just lost a bit of intensity? Is it the makeup of the midfield? Are they missing Kevin De Bruyne? Obviously, they wanted to sign Lucas Paquetá. We'll probably talk about him later. I think he would have been a great addition. I'm not sure that Nunez is anywhere near his level, to be honest. And they haven't really replaced Gundogan. So I think this is a huge opportunity for the likes of Liverpool and Arsenal to really take advantage. I don't think City are going to win the league this season.
Yeah, I can see why you say that. They would need a good run at the end of the season, but they're pretty good at doing that. I'd keep my powder dry for now, but I've said to you, I think Liverpool are the value bet, and I still believe that, even though they've been disappointed today. Understandably, Pep was fuming with his team. 75% possession, 19 shots, 9 on target. It doesn't reflect, and you don't get anything. And it's one of the things that actually Roy Keane was saying in the game after the game between Liverpool and Manchester United. You don't get anything for shots on target. You don't get anything for possession. You get things for goals. And one of the things that Roy Hodgson said in the aftermath of this game, which I thought was really interesting, is that patience sometimes is a real virtue. And you know that they're going to have loads of chances. You know they're going to be on top of you. And if you open up the game early, they're going to murder you. But then if you keep it tight and really tight, then you can decide
when to press go.
We'll go for it now because we've got nothing to lose. And he said the fact that they got the goal back actually allowed them. I thought it was a big mistake by Diaz, by the way, for that goal that they got back. I think, just got slightly caught out quite, didn't really know where Mateta was. And then it gives you the opportunity to have a real go really late in the game. And they did that. And obviously then won the penalty.
Great penalty from Elise under that pressure, away from home against the champions of Europe, right in the corner. And as we mentioned, they've got a history, haven't they, when it comes to disrupting Manchester City. And that'll just buy Roy Hodgson a little bit of time, because I think he was under some pressure. But again, it's proved the players are with him.
What about Jack Grealish? Because he's been under a little bit of scrutiny, hasn't he, early in the season because of the arrival of Jeremy Doku. But he's actually produced quite a few little cameos of importance. We had to wait until the 3rd of December for his first goal of the season, but since then, he's got on the score sheet in 3 consecutive Premier League games for the first time in his career.
Yeah, and he'll be pleased with that. As you say, it's been difficult for him on the back of that treble win. Doku coming in, fresh face, hungry player, and someone who's settled really quickly to the Premier League. So I don't think it's necessarily been to the fact Grealish is out of form that he's lost his place in the team. It's because Doku has done so well. But I think he was one of City's better players, Grealish, at the weekend. Foden played well as well. It was the defensive mistakes that cost them. And I do worry about that back line. We've spoken about it, the reliance on John Stones. For me, the fact that Guardiola is still not looking like a £90 million footballer at this moment in time.
But their recruitment's been a little bit suspect this year. Kovacic hasn't been perfect. He might come good for them. Matthias Nunes is not Ilkay Gundogan. And you mentioned there Josko Gvardiol, as good as he is, he's not really a left back, is he? I mean, that's the other thing. There's a little bit of imbalance there, and they seem to have been operating for a couple of seasons now without a specialist left back, which is a slightly weird sort of blind spot to have for Pep Guardiola and his recruitment team, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And if Scott Minto was here, he'd tell us how important fullbacks are. But they are in the modern game, actually. They're more important now than when Scott himself was playing. And I think, Guardiola just doesn't really have the makeup of a modern-day fullback, certainly not in a league as testing as this one.
Manchester City drawing their game on Saturday afternoon. Right, okay, shall we talk a little bit about Newcastle United, 3-0 winners over Fulham. Newcastle weren't perfect in this game, and actually it took a little while to get going, and Fulham were okay until the ridiculous decision from Raul Jimenez, who I think was furious with Jamal Lascelles. He felt he'd been elbowed, and that should have been a sending off. That was one of those where you just think, it could have been, couldn't have been. But the sending off itself, where Jimenez jumps into Longstaff, stupid. What is he doing?
Well, he's let his team down, and he's let his manager down, which is why I was so surprised with Marco Silva's comments about the referee.
He seemed to think that the referee made the right decision, the VAR made the wrong decision. But the referee called it wrong, right?
Yeah. I think you're right. I think Jimenez is het up because he feels he's been whacked in the face, and maybe there wasn't enough punishment dished out to Lascelles. But you can't go seeking retribution, especially as you're not even seeking retribution against the player who's done you. You've gone for one of his teammates. He's ridiculously high off the ground. I think he almost changed his mind mid-flight, and that's why the contact perhaps isn't as forceful as it could have been. But it's still a red card offence.
You know how difficult it is as well, don't you, to change your mind mid-flight?
Yeah, especially when you're a big guy.
Yeah, because you were trying to get over a fence earlier in the Utting Avenue car park in Liverpool, and you decided, because there's two ways to go with this. There's a little fence that sort of blocks the entrance to the car park, and there's a pedestrian you have to go either over or under.
I tried both.
You went over first of all, and changed your mind mid-flight, and it was difficult for you to adjust, wasn't it?
It was.
One of those moments where I really wished my camera worked a lot faster.
And then you tried to film me on the way back, but I'd gone under, and it wasn't quite as good a video.
It wasn't graceful though, was it? I mean, it was no limbo.
But Jimenez's challenge wasn't graceful either, and it's changed the course of the game. I actually fancied Fulham to come away with at least a point from St James's Park. Newcastle on the back of that Champions League defeat. But once he gets sent off, there's only one winner, and Eddie Howe was very grateful, I'm sure, that he did that to himself.
You skirted over that, jumping over the fence, but you did rip your trousers, didn't you? You popped a couple of stitches. You said to me,
it's just not true, is it?
You did. You said to me, I think I've popped a couple of stitches in there. Actually, you've just had to.
I wasn't talking about my trousers.
Was it those stitches that you popped? Oh, crikey. And I'm sitting this close to you now, you could be bleeding everywhere. Anyway, Lewis Miley got his first goal for the club as well. Delighted, 17 years of age. He's actually been terrific since he came in to the group. He's played very, very well. I know that in pre-season, the manager really wanted to include him because he'd done so well on the pre-season tour. He got a bout of glandular fever, I think.
Nasty.
And as a result, didn't get into the team as quickly as maybe he might have done. He's been superb, and he's a local lad. And him, Dan Burn, Longstaff, being part of that group, I think just adds to the sort of narrative that Newcastle are building up. Bruno Guimaraes was brilliant in the post-match interviews. They were sort of the two of them were talking. He goes, "I can't believe he's 17. I can't believe he's 17."
He said it 2 or 3 times, didn't he?
I can't believe he's 17. He is 17, Bruno, just so you know. And they needed that boost after what could have been a dispiriting reaction to going out of the Champions League.
Yeah, I think they'll look back with regret on that. Obviously, it was a difficult group, but you look at that Milan game, maybe not necessarily in terms of going out of the Champions League, but to go out of Europe altogether, I think they had an opportunity to get at least a point from that game. I think maybe they were a bit too gung-ho when they were looking for a goal after Milan had equalised, when actually the onus would have been on Milan to come out on the attack as the game wore on. But maybe there's a bit of naivety there that they'll learn from that. It's a brilliant way to bounce back, and they continue their tremendous home form in the Premier League. And they're just about on the coattails of the top 4. I don't think they'll do it this season, but they're going to have a good go.
You say that, but maybe if I was a Newcastle supporter or I was Eddie Howe or Jason Tindall, I'd be pointing to the fact that we'd gone to Paris, we basically beat PSG, and someone gave a spurious penalty, which has robbed us of place not only in Europe, but in the Champions League knockout stages themselves. So, I think we can have a go at them for their performances. I don't think they were very good against Dortmund in either leg, actually. They're below par in both of those. But largely, I think they've done enough to be able to play in the second half of the season in the Europa League. But it wasn't to be for them. It was also a welcome clean sheet for Eddie Howe's men, which is not something that's come as often as it might. But at home, they are just a very different animal. And they've got some interesting fixtures coming up. I'll be doing their game. They're at home to Nottingham Forest on Boxing Day. And then I'll be doing their game on New Year's Day when they go to Liverpool. And Liverpool themselves, we talked about whether or not they can be title challengers. It's a defining period now because they've got Arsenal and Newcastle in quick succession, and they go away to Burnley in between.
And a cup quarter-final this week as
West Ham, yes.
Yeah, interesting times, and obviously they picked up another injury today as well with Gravenberch, but Newcastle's starting to get players back where you think they are, and then they pick up more injuries.
Oh, yeah, because Cher went off injured. Joe Linton had a hamstring problem.
Yeah, and they're both going to be big losses. Cher, I think, has really excelled under Eddie Howe, and obviously Joe Linton has been transformed, has become the heartbeat of the team, so it never rains, but it pours up on the northeast.
It doesn't actually rain that much up there. It rains more here. Trust me. You'll see that tomorrow when you wake up. Definitely going to rain. It hasn't rained today, so it must rain tomorrow. Anthony Gordon hitting the underside of the bar, also in that game. Let's move on to some more of Saturday's action, including Chelsea getting a rare victory at home. Wow. So you and I were both lucky enough, or unlucky enough, to watch 90 minutes of Chelsea versus Sheffield United. And look, it was a backs-to-the-wall job by Sheffield United in the first half, and they sat behind the ball. But ultimately, Chelsea did have enough to break them open. And the key that unlocked the door was Cole Palmer.
Yeah, brilliant. And, we've been talking about Man City, lack of creativity, maybe without De Bruyne and without Gundogan. I wonder if Pep Guardiola might live to rue letting him go, because I think he's been terrific for Chelsea.
Do you think he has any regret? He doesn't really do that, does he? He's never going to tell you that he regrets.
No, he won't. No, so we'll never know. But I think Cole Palmer's gone there with a point to prove. I think he's a really talented footballer. He was involved in both goals. I think him and Conor Gallagher probably were Chelsea's standout performers. But it wasn't a great game. It was the night after the talkSPORT Christmas party that I wasn't going to go to.
You did go to.
Then I did, and
you didn't tell me about it.
And I enjoyed myself.
And I didn't go.
So did Ray Parlour.
And you were really hungover.
I don't think that the game, certainly the first half, did much to cure our hangovers. But they got the job done, Chelsea, and it felt like quite a significant win from Mauricio Pochettino, because if they'd not beaten Sheffield United at home, I think some Chelsea fans may have turned.
Palmer, we talked about his contribution. You just need the eye test to be able to see how good he is. But he's been involved in 13 goals in 19 appearances for Chelsea.
Very good.
Which is some statistic for a lad that's just come into the group and has, probably thought he might have to establish himself in the team. But he's been better than that. He's slipped in seamlessly. They enjoyed 80% possession in the first half. Didn't have too many efforts on goal. Sheffield United under Chris Wilder, I mean, you could understand what they were trying to do, but I think he was pretty open and honest afterwards when he said that there's a degree of naivety about the group.
Yeah, they don't look like a Premier League team, and you wonder what assurances Wilder's been given for January, because I think unless they can bring in some Premier League pedigree, I think it's going to be very difficult for him to keep them up. They did have one big moment in the first half when Bogle put the cross along the 6-yard line. Had there been a red and white shirt to tap that in, again, it would have changed the dynamics of the game. They have improved, I think, under Wilder. They look a little bit more organised. They're playing with a bit more identity, I think, than maybe they had under Paul Heckingbottom. But as I say, it's still difficult to make a case for them staying up.
Burnley 0, Everton 2. What was this game? I thought Everton were really good right from the very off. They really took it to Burnley, as you would probably expect for Sean Dyche going back to Turf Moor for the first time. He got a standing ovation as soon as he turned up. But Vincent Kompany is struggling a little bit, I think. I mean, we've mentioned this quite a lot, that, you know, there's a lot of talk about his project and his style of play and the way that they've all bought into his sort of mode of football, but it's really not working. I mean, It simply is not working, and they are going to go down unless they change the way they approach things. Difficult to do when you've got a group of players that have been hired to play in a particular system, but yeah, I think they're going to. I mean, they're going to go down quickly, aren't they?
They'll be down by March, I think, the way they're playing. And I felt a bit sorry for the goalkeeper, actually, because he made all those saves against Brighton. He made a couple of excellent saves in this game. And then...
Wasn't Shay Given brilliant on Match of the Day, by the way, like analysing his performance and why he had a problem with the corner?
Yeah, he said he jumped on one foot instead of two.
He jumped on 2 feet instead of one, because on one you get higher, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, and I think if you go back and analyse the goal that Arsenal scored against St Gabriel, I think it was, stood in front of him a corner, the goalkeeper doesn't really get high off the ground, he heads it in. So it's obviously a weak point, but he's a young player, he will improve. It was a gamble, I think, when Burnley signed him, but he's not their main problem. Their main problem is that the forward players that they've signed aren't scoring any goals. Defensively, they give away too many chances. And yeah, I'm surprised that more questions aren't being asked about Vincent Kompany. I know he did a great job last season, but surely that credit only gets you so far. They're just not good enough, Burnley. Yeah, and they spent money in the summer.
Yeah, they did. And are they actually just thinking about long-term success rather than short-term gain? Because you could end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater and going for a completely different system, as I suggested. You know, if they don't do it, they're going to go down. But actually, maybe they will go down. They'll hone it again. They'll come back up, and they'll tweak it slightly more. Those players will be a little bit more experienced. I'm not saying that's exactly how it's going to work, but that's a possibility. That might be in their thinking. And if they've got long-term patient owners with a clear vision, and they've really bought into his philosophy, then maybe that is the best way to go forward.
Well, they did that before, didn't they? With Sean Dyche, went down into the Championship, stuck with him, and he got them back up. But I think we need to give Sean Dyche an awful lot of credit as well. I wasn't surprised that Everton won that game. I think they were one of the bets of the weekend, really, because they are in such a good vein of form that they're not conceding goals. They're taking their opportunities. And actually, I saw a tweet from an Everton fan suggesting that they haven't wiped out their 10-point deduction because they're still 10 points worse off than they feel they should be. But it really has galvanised them, hasn't it? That punishment they've had from the Premier League. They've been on a brilliant run ever since. And you have to credit the manager for picking his dressing room up and creating that siege mentality.
He'll get manager of the year if they're finishing the top half with 10 points deducted, won't he?
Yeah, it'd be a brilliant achievement. And I mean, they're in no danger of going down, are they, Everton? In fact, obviously, the Luton game needs to be replayed so that there will be a game in hand there. But it's hard to make a case for any of the three promoted teams staying up at this moment in time.
And even though Wolverhampton Wanderers have slipped a little bit further this weekend and Nottingham Forest have slipped a little bit this weekend, there's still a little gap, isn't there, between those bottom three and fourth from bottom side. So, look, I think Christmas is always a defining period because there's so many games in such quick succession. So I think we'll have a better idea about what's going to happen by the time we get to the middle of January and after the sort of pause for the FA Cup as well. Then there's sort of that mini winter break where half the teams play and half the teams don't play. So it's sort of quite a...
Yeah, I think Manchester United have only got 2 games in January at the moment. Obviously, there's a possibility of an FA Cup fourth round. So
we've got to get past Wigan in order to get that, mate.
But it's going to make the January transfer window quite interesting as well.
Score past Wigan, you think that's possible?
Yeah, I think they'll be okay.
Be right,
yeah. Hoyland might even score then.
You said that they would be all right against Bayern Munich.
Well, they should have been, really. But anyway, it's not a Manchester United podcast. We're talking about Burnley and Everton.
We're talking about the FA Cup, actually. 4 wins, 4 clean sheets. If it wasn't for the points deduction, they could have been closing in on one of the European places, which is true. West Ham beat Wolves. 3 brilliant goals on the counter-attack. That's counter-attacking football at its very best, and Paquetá was certainly at the heart of all 3. He got 3 assists. And listen, his passing was just perfect.
Yeah, he's a player. I mean, you can see why Man City had him in their sights. And, he could have sulked after that because obviously you've got this betting investigation allegation that's still hanging over his head. He's missed out on his dream move because my understanding is that it was pretty much a done deal that he would join City. West Ham were geared up for that as well. But the way that he's dusted himself down and become a real leader in that team, kudos as well. I mean, you look at Anthony, who obviously came from the same club as Kudus, and you do wonder, did Erik Ten Hag go back and sign the wrong winger? Because he's got the end product that Anthony hasn't shown so far in his Premier League career. And that was a big win for West Ham because obviously that they've struggled at times coming off the back of European games to pick up points in the Premier League. They're 8th in the table. They're in the last 16 of the Europa League. You have to say that's a good first half of the season for David Moyes.
Wolverhampton Wanderers had scored in the previous 17 games in all competitions. The last time they'd failed to score was on the opening night of the season when they were robbed at Old Trafford. But West Ham United were their undoing, as they often are, as many teams are when they go to the capital. I know you don't like going to certain places, or certain places don't like hosting you. There's certain cities that you're a bit afraid of, you don't like very much. You won't go to the toilet in them just in case you're scared. But Wolves don't like London. They hate London. Their last 14 trips to London in the Premier League, they haven't won any of them.
So and they've got Brentford in the FA Cup.
So that's going to be a problem for them as well. So they've had another bad day. Down. And they had the goal disallowed as well. VAR, did you see it?
Was tight. It was very tight. I mean, I'm not convinced it was necessarily offside.
Tight? I mean, honestly, it was like the tip of the shoe leather right at the front of someone's boot. And you just thought...
It's not what VAR is supposed to be. But I don't think it would have changed the outcome. I think West Ham would have had too much.
It was at the point where it was 2-0. It would have gone 2-1. It might have changed the outcome.
Yeah, I'm not convinced. I think West Ham were better. And I think Gary O'Neill will admit that.
Yeah, okay, well, we'll see what happens with them. We mentioned Aston Villa?
No.
We should mention Aston Villa because, again...
You never give them enough credit, do you?
Well, apparently I don't, but this is not... I didn't do the running order tonight, so I'm giving them the credit. It's not even in the running order, but I'm bringing it up because I want to give them credit because they once again... I think it's 9 victories in the last 12 Premier League games now, in all, home or away, so they've done very well, all told now. And Brentford, I think, did suffer after the sending off to Ben Mee. And it was a sending off. And I know Thomas Frank wasn't happy about it at the time, but I think on review, when he sees it, he'll realise it's very similar to the Basuma one on Friday night, I thought, in terms of level of contact, speed at the time. And you look at the real-time pictures and you think, red card. It was very high.
Yeah, and it's disappointing because he's such an experienced player, Ben Mee. And I think you're right. I think without that, Brentford might have been capable of holding on for a point, but their loss was Aston Villa's gain. Ollie Watkins coming back to haunt his old club. Got some stick, it seems, from one supporter behind the goal. I don't understand that. This is a player who's come from the EFL, gone to Brentford, done very well. They've sold him for a handsome fee. He's conducted himself brilliantly. He's a good lad. He's gone on to play for England. They should be proud of that, Brentford. They shouldn't be hammering him on his return. And do you know what?
It was just one fan, I think.
Yeah, but do you know what? Good on him. Good on him for standing up to that one fan because I think it's a disgrace.
Yeah, it was a little bit unnecessary. And actually, Thomas Frank said he actually went to him and said to him, "Why did you do that?" And he explained it to him. And he said, they're still on texting terms apparently and speak quite a lot. And he said, and then Thomas Frank came out after and said, he's a man of integrity. I didn't understand it. You'll have to ask him about it. I'm not going to get involved in it. But usually I would trust what he is saying. So, fair play. Thomas Frank's very good at sort of being diplomatic. I was probably happy that he didn't have to talk about the Ben Mee sending off too much because of that incident that happened right at the very end. But it was a late goal. It was a late goal, a late winner, and it all did kick off. It went a little bit crazy in that game, didn't it? There was a couple of
Emi Martinez up to his dark arts.
Well, Neil Maupay and Emi Martinez. I mean, if you could have picked 2 blokes to be involved in some sort of scuffle or a bit of housery, it probably would be those 2.
Yeah, absolutely. They could start a fight in an empty room, either of them. But you're right to mention Villa's away form because we've given them a lot of praise for their home form. The away form at times this season has been a little bit debatable, but they seem to have sorted that out. And you have to give them credit. They're hanging in there. I don't see them as title contenders. We asked the question last week, but that is the mark of a good side who can go to a place like Brentford and maybe not be brilliant and still find a way to win the game.
Yeah, actually, it's 10 wins in the last 13 Premier League
Brilliant
games.
record.
And quote of the week goes to Unai Emery, who did say about Emi Martinez, he is a mature and sensible character. It's at this point we roll in that picture of him at the World Cup.
Almost a year ago to the day, in actual fact, since he was making a fake penis of a trophy.
Mature and sensible. He'd probably be quite good on this sofa, to be fair. The other stat of the weekend was the Brighton stat, wasn't it? That was the best one of the whole weekend because I mentioned this on the Sunday session. They changed their goalkeeper again today. Bruggen played today. So Brighton have made more changes to their starting lineup than anyone else, all told, right? But they have changed their starting goalkeeper more often than this season than Liverpool changed their starting goalkeeper between the years of 1970 and 1981.
That is stat of the weekend. I'm not a fan. We got people at Brighton who say, yeah, De Zerbi, he's told both goalkeepers they're fine with it. You need a number one. Teams have always had a number one. I don't like it.
Well, we'll see what happens over the course of the next few weeks and months. That's it from us. Thank you very much for joining us. Perry, hopefully, will be back with us soon, or Scott, one of them. Although
it's a bit too cozy. This.
I did enjoy it. Come and give me a cuddle.
No, I don't want to cuddle you.
You want to spend the night here in this little basement?
Is it too late to get a train?
Quick, get an Uber. Right, that's it from us. Make sure you give us a review. We'd like to hear from you, and keep tuning in to the Premier League All Access podcast from talkSPORT.